KM.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the American Supply Association's Mike Miazga. We'd like to welcome you to another webinar on the ASA members-only webinar series. Today, we are talking about the importance of product certification in water safety. I'll be joined shortly here by the International Code Council Evaluation Services President, Shahin Moinian. Before we get into the webinar, a couple of quick ASA notes. As always, we like to thank our many supplier partners, of which International Code Council is one of them. Without the support of ASA supplier partner members, the many programs and benefits that are available to ASA members would not be possible without the generous support of our supplier partners. We are less than 3 weeks away now from our big Network 2020 virtual conference, October 7th and 8th. Easy to get registered, $99 per company, and the $99 fee gets everybody in the company, every employee access, whether you have 1,000 people in the company or 10 people in the company, everybody has access to Network 2020 virtual. You can go to the ASA website for more information, asa.net. And now, today we're gonna, as I said, we're learning about the importance of product certification and water safety. During the session today, you'll learn about better understanding the process that goes into developing building and plumbing product evaluation reports and listings, and why certification is crucial to safety, especially when it comes to addressing updated codes and standards for lead in drinking water. Conformity assessment is essential, so essential in fact that the EPA made product certification a requirement in the final rule of the Reduction of Lead in Drinking Water Act. Today we'll learn more about the importance of ICC-ES marks of conformity, and also we'll take some questions at the end in the question area on your control panel there. Hit that question icon and type in your question, and we'll get to all the questions at the end here. Today, we're joined by Shahin Moinian, the president of ICC Evaluation Service, one of the International Code Council's family of solutions. He oversees all product evaluation certification activities within ICC-ES, including building, plumbing, mechanical, fuel gas, swimming pool and spas, private sewage disposals, and other related products. He has served as a senior vice president for ICC-ES growth strategies and certification programs. Shahin began his career as a project engineer at a spa manufacturing company designing products and components. He then joined a listing agency as an assistant director and eventually a director of research, and then took over as director of codes and standards for Moen. And he also is a member of numerous professional organizations, including ASME and ASPE. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome today Shahin Moinian. How you doing today? Shahin?
I'm sorry, it looks like I was muted. I just want to thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm humbled. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome everybody who is on the webinar today. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about product certification, some of the aspects that are very important to drinking water with regards to the reduction of lead in drinking water, as well as AB 2060. With that, before getting into the meat of it, I was going to mention that as was mentioned, I'm the president of ICC Evaluation Service, which is the conformity assessment leg of the Code Council, which is one of the sides that we're going to talk about today. The Code Council also has an accreditation service under the International Accreditation Service Incorporated, which conducts product or certification activity accreditation to the requirements of ISO 17065, for laboratories 17025, for inspection agencies, ISO 17020. With regards to codes, we obviously publish the codes for the nation in a variety of ways. Our plumbing code is in about 30-some states. We also have a subsidiary that is called the General Codes that codifies the the municipalities' requirements and ordinances, and then gives it back to them for enforcement. We also have a testing laboratory and inspection agency, and all of those are related to the activities that we're going to talk about today. So I want to thank you for that. The first slide, by the way, let me see if I have control over the slides, and it doesn't look like I have yet. Okay, I think I have control now. Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to introduce the product certification, in particular in the area of plumbing products. Now, in the United States and Canada, product certification is conducted through a variety of codes, from the Uniform Plumbing Code to the International Plumbing Code to some of the other local codes, and obviously the codes in north of the border in the National Plumbing Code of Canada. The certification is also conducted to standards referenced in these codes. Many of these codes, if not all of them, have a chapter that references a variety of standards that are related to the products at hand. And then the scheme operators, meaning the product certifiers, they operate their own schemes, and there are many, many scheme operators, by the way. Some of the schemes are not owned by product certifiers, and we're going to talk about that as well. Some of them are owned by the government, such as the Energy Star, which is a scheme that is owned by the EPA and it's operated by a variety of certification bodies. Now, I talked about a number of different plumbing products plumbing codes that a variety of agencies certify products to. As I mentioned, International Plumbing Code is the one that ICC publishes, and we certify products to it. But then there's Uniform Plumbing Code, which is in a variety of states in the western side of the United States. And so certifier normally tries to certify to both codes to be able to allow the manufacturers to sell their products or get their products approved for installation throughout the United States. The residential code is a code that covers more than just the plumbing aspects of a product. It covers requirements in the building side and a variety of other sides, mechanical and fuel gas. But there are a few chapters specifically dedicated to plumbing, and a number of certifiers review products in accordance with the International Residential Code as well. Now, the National Plumbing Code of Canada is, as the name tells you, it's for the country of Canada. Canada has a number of provinces and territories, and the plumbing code is adopted throughout the nation. Canada happens to have one national code, although there are some local regional codes in provinces that may have their own requirements in it. And all of these codes that I just mentioned to you have requirements within standards referenced in their specific chapters, and those standards are related to a variety of products. Many of them are related to endpoint devices, such as faucets, that we're going to discuss during this presentation. There are two codes that I know. One is the International Plumbing Code, and the other one is the Uniform Plumbing Code. They have specific statements with regards to third-party certification. The International Plumbing Code, the statement is right in front of you. It talks about plumbing products and materials shall be listed by a third-party certification agency as complying with the reference standards. Products and materials shall be identified in accordance with the section 303.1. Now, there are a few items in it that I want to specifically identify. One is the certification of products. One is the third-party certification of the products. And then it gets into the standards referenced in the code that the products need to be certified to. And at the end, it talks about the identification of the certified body. The certified product needs to have an identification on the product to show that the product is actually certified. Now, this section, what it means is, it means that the code officials normally have to look for a mark of conformity, and the mark is normally designated by a certification body or a conformity assessment body. And the mark needs to be shown either on the product, in certain cases, especially products that have aesthetic values, certification bodies allow the mark to go on the packages. But the mark needs to be looked at, and before the code official or the authority having jurisdiction approves it, it allows installation of that product. Now, the mark of conformity normally is provided by the approved agency, and the term approved agency is used in a variety of ways by different jurisdictions. In many cases, though, the term approved agency means that the agency has been accredited by an accrediting body to the requirements of what at this point is in place, which is ISO/IEC 17065. There are entities that have requirements above and beyond that, but that accreditation is very important. Now, the accreditation itself, as important as it is the scope of accreditation is even more important than the accreditation itself. For instance, if ABC certification body is accredited to ISO/IEC 17065, yet their scope of accreditation does not include review of products to the requirements of, for instance, NSF 61, then obviously that agency's certification should not be used as proof of compliance to allow approval and installation of that product. And one thing that accreditation also proves is the level of competence by the service providers. And we're going to go into the details of what 17065 includes in it. Product certification has a definition actually in ISO/IEC 17000, but my definition of product certification is continuous compliance of a product to a set protocol. That protocol could be a standard, could be a criteria, or any other normative document. Now, there's different certification steps, which include testing and review of the product and periodic inspection of the product at the manufacturing plant. The two items that I feel are very, very important and paramount to product certification is the testing itself and then the periodic evaluation through surveillance or inspections of the manufacturing facilities to make sure first that the product was tested properly and has met the requirements of a set document, but also to make sure that the product has continued to comply with that set document after the certification was granted. Now, with regards to the importance of the conformity assessment, I have been in the industry for about 35 years now, and I've noticed that the importance of conformity assessment is increasing, not just to people who are educated or in the industry and so on, but to the consumers. Consumers would like and demand safer products, and that's not just in the United States, it's worldwide. I was going to bring an example, and I'm not sure if I'm an average consumer, but when I go to home centers and I try to buy a product to bring it home to either install or just use, I do look for proof of compliance of that product by an agency. So I do look for a mark of conformity. And for instance, I recently bought a water filter, and I just wanted to make sure that that water filter has met the requirements of NSF 42 or 53 or both. And it actually was on the packaging of that product. So it's important to consumers. Now, it is critical also to ensure safe water for residents around the world. Now, safe water has a variety of definitions, but for for the topics that we're going to discuss today, meaning lead leachate in drinking water, as well as the amount of lead in plumbing products, pipes, fixtures, and fittings, when those fixtures and fittings carry water for cooking or drinking purposes. This is obviously very important to make sure that the conduits and the fittings that carry that water are safe for use. Normally, conformity assessment looks at characteristics such as quality, safety, the economy of it, reliability, which is very important, compatibility, efficiency, effectiveness, and all of those can be examined through conformity assessment. Now, it assures that the products deliver on what they promise. Going back to the example of the water filter, I have some memory of NSF 42 and 53, and 42 in particular. It talks about taste and odor, and 53 gets into reduction of certain chemicals or carcinogens, for instance, reduction of lead. If there's a claim that a product makes, and a claim is allowed to be made through the requirements of the standard, it is best for that claim to be reviewed and tested through a conformity assessment body, and to make sure that that claim continues to be valid. So that's where that bullet comes about, which is to assure that the products deliver on their promise. Now, it also allows better ability for the population to protect themselves. That kind of goes without saying. Now, I've put this next item on, which in a way is important for company owners or investors who own organizations or manufacturing facilities that produce these plumbing products. They want to make sure that their investment is secure. And how do they make sure that if the product that their manufacturing facilities produces, if these products do not meet the requirements or fail as far as the safety or quality is concerned, or reliability, or even efficiency, chances are that the product is not going to sell very much, and chances are that there may be lawsuits against the company as a result of lack of compliance. And so conformity assessment can actually take care of all that aspects as well. Users can be assured that products are safe for usage and can perform as expected. And for instance, if you buy a kitchen faucet and it says that the flow rate is, say, 1.8 gallons per minute, and if the flow is more or much less, obviously the product is not performing as expected, and that's where conformity assessment comes in to assure that products have met the requirements of standards. Again, standards are minimum requirements. Some products go beyond that, but it's very important for the products to meet the minimum requirements set forth in standards or the codes. Now, there are different types of conformity assessment. The first party is generally the suppliers of the products or the manufacturers. An example of the first party certification is in Europe through the CE mark. I think CE mark stands for Certification Européenne. And for a variety of product categories, manufacturers can certify their own products. But obviously it's first party because they have interest in the products they produce, and so it's not as independent as it could be. The second party is the purchasers and users. That's one step removed from the suppliers and manufacturers. But again, both purchasers and users, they have more interest in the product itself. And as a result, it's not as independent as it could be. And that's where the third party certification comes in, which is an independent entity, such as ourselves or many other independent entities that perform product certification. And it is certainly distinct from the first and second party, because third party organizations like ourselves, they have no interest in the transaction between the two parties, and therefore they could be more independent and more independent in the evaluation of the product. Government is involved. I mentioned that they have a unique role. They're regulators, and I mentioned the Energy Star, but there are many others. The WaterSense program was a program that EPA put together. Now, WaterSense came up with a number of specifications for a number of products, but they do not conduct the product certification or evaluation themselves. They actually allow operators like certification bodies to conduct those evaluations. So in the case of EPA WaterSense, certifiers need to be licensed and recognized by EPA, but they still have to go and get accreditation by an accrediting body such as A2LA, such as ANSI, such as IAS, and then they can start operating the scheme that EPA has put together. Now I'm going back into history and some of the standards that have been used throughout the years for accrediting certification bodies. And the one that at least I'm familiar with, and it was started in the mid-90s, was ANSI Z34.1. At that time, ANSI started the accreditation process using the standard. The standard had many sections within it that referenced many ISO standards. Now, as you can see, some of these ISO standards are predecessors to the current ones, like the Guide 2 now is 17,000, I should say. Guide 7 is 17,007. Guide 25 is 17,025, and the list goes on and on. So that was the predecessor, and ANSI started doing that. Now, globally, ISO Guide 40 was the first standard that was used for conformity assessment by accrediting bodies. In the mid-1990s, ISO Guide 65 was put together, and as a result, many of the accrediting bodies switched over from Z34.1 or Guide 40 and started conducting accreditation activities to ISO Guide 65. Guide 65 was a very good document, but it was a guide, and as a result, there were some ambiguities within it, which each accrediting body had to resolve in its own way. There was a guidance document that was put together for this guide to answer some of the questions or ambiguities, but it still was not enough, and as a result, ISO decided to form the Working Group 29 in the mid-2000s and to start working on another document, which eventually was called ISO IEC 17065. I was actually a member of that working group, and I attended 3 of their 4 meetings and contributed to the standard. 17065 was written based upon another ISO standard that at the time was very new, which was called ISO 17021, which had to do with management's registration or management system activities that covered standards like ISO 9001 for management system or 14,000 for environmental management system. So, and ISO 17065 is still in place, by the way. ISO 17065 makes reference to a variety of standards, but the 3 that you see on the screen, in my view, are some of the more important standards. 17007 is the guidance for writing standards. So there were 2 activities that I mentioned earlier that are paramount in product certification. One is testing and one is inspections. And 17007 is important because it writes the requirements that the test reports or testings are based upon. And we're going to get a little bit into 17007 in the next slides. 17020 is important because not just because of the initial inspection of a manufacturing facility to make sure that there's a quality system in place, but for continuous compliance of products to make sure that products continue to comply with a set document or with the initial requirements set forth and put in place for the evaluation of that particular product. And 17025, as I mentioned, has to do with testing, and testing, as we mentioned, is very, very important. Now, 17065 requires a variety of things, but one is for the certification body to be a legal entity, which means the certification body has to be responsible for the activities that it conducts. And that's very important. The second one is having a certification agreement. Now, the certification agreement is called a variety of ways by a variety of certification bodies. I know we call them rules of procedures. Some people call them licensing agreements or listing agreements, so there's a variety of names to it, but it's an agreement between the client and the certification body, and it basically dictates what both parties are obligated to do after the certification is granted. A very important document. Next one is a method to manage impartiality, and Guide 65 had some specific requirements for managing impartiality, but 17065 went to the next level. And one of the things that comes to mind is the requirement to have a impartiality committee to review a variety of things, such as the review of policies and procedures, the review of internal audits, also examining if companies like ourselves, if they have a variety of subsidiaries, to ensure that the subsidiaries don't have activities that would affect the impartiality of product certification of ICC-ES in this case. So what we do is actually we conduct what we call a failure mode effect analysis and we analyze all aspects of the other subsidiaries and their functions versus ours to make sure that impartiality is in place. We also do an analysis with regards to outside entities and how they can affect our impartiality. So they're very important, and it's something that 17065 talks about much more detail than ISO Guide 65. Obviously, the policies and procedures shall be written in a non-discriminatory manner. And one of the things that for that purpose is to make sure that our certification or anybody's certification is accessible to whomever wishes to certify their products. Confidentiality is very important. Obviously, one manufacturer does not want the information within the certification body's files to be shared with another. The only times that we may share such information with an outside entity is through the legal action or subpoenas, and our accreditors also are allowed to look at our internal information, but at no other time can the confidential information be shared with any other body. ISO 17065 requires certain information to be publicly available. Some of them have to do with the application information, but the most important part of it has to do with a directory of listing of products that have been certified. In the old days, I do recall the directories were in volumes, and people would publish them on once a month basis. That practice has gone away a long time ago. Now the directories are all online, and they are actually real time. The information is real time, and there's a lot more information nowadays about the product, the method of evaluation, the standard the product was evaluated to, and a lot of other aspects. But those are the type of things that the standard requires to remain public. There should be an organizational structure to manage all aspects of conformity assessment. That goes without saying. But I'm going to go to the next one, which is the competence of the personnel. I'm going to use an example. A few years back, I reviewed a C channel based upon a load testing that was conducted by a test laboratory and the thickness of the C channel, and I managed to calculate the height limitation of that particular product. Well, that was about 8 years ago, and for me, even with my mechanical engineering degrees, to say that I'm competent to conduct that evaluation today would not be a true statement. For me to conduct that evaluation today, I have to do that under somebody who has established competence. Either I need to get more training, or I need to conduct that with somebody else peer reviewing my review. And all of those competence activities need to be documented. We actually have a quality system that documents the competence of every single engineer with every standard to make sure that at the time that the application comes in, those people that wish to review the products still have the competence to conduct such review. And last but not least is the infrastructure to conduct surveillance, and that again goes without saying. We need, or every certification body needs to conduct inspections on a periodic basis. Inspections, during the inspections, there are a variety of activities that transpire. The inspectors go through the quality system, as I mentioned. They go through engineering change notices to make sure that the changes that a product has undergone does not affect the certification of that product. And sometimes they select samples, the inspectors select samples and send them to a laboratory for testing, or they do spot check testing at the manufacturing facility to make sure that the product is continuing to comply with the requirements of the said standard. Procedures for complaints and appeals are required by certification by 17065 to exist at every certification body's procedures. There are times that certifications are challenged, and therefore that avenue has to always be open. Internal audits, as I mentioned, are important, although many organizations, they get external audits on a regular basis. We, for instance, this year have had audits for a period of 5 months by a variety of assessors from a variety of accrediting bodies. And we expect this to continue on as our accreditations proliferate. But an internal audit gives us a view of how things are before the external auditors come in to see if we are actually doing what we're supposed to be doing. And the market conformity obviously is very, very important. It's what goes on the product and shows proof of compliance of the product to a set standard. Now, I mentioned that I'm going to talk about ISO 17007. ISO 17007 is the guidance for drafting normative documents suitable for use for conformity assessment. And again, since testing is very important and testing is conducted to standards, the information within a standard, they're very important. There are 5 principles within 17007, and I'm going to go through every one of them, hopefully not in too much detail. I know we have only 25 minutes left. One is separation of specified requirements for the object of conformity assessment from specified requirements related to conformity assessment activities themselves. And a good example is mark of conformity. So a mark of conformity is a part of a scheme, and it's not a part of a requirement for the product to meet. So a mark of conformity should not be a part of a product standard. It should be a part of the requirements of a certification body. So there should be a separation. Principle 2 is neutrality towards parties. Now, we discussed that there's first, second, and third party, and the standards should be written in a manner that all 3 parties can certify products to it, whether it's users or whether it's the suppliers or the third-party certification agencies. The principle 3 has to do with the functional approach to conformity assessment, and it talks about the way the standard is written, how the samples are supposed to be selected, and what tests are required, and how they should be reviewed. So basically, this is where it gets to the motherhood and apple pie parts of what needs to go to the standard. 4 is very important. I know at times manufacturers state that certification bodies may have inconsistencies, and some of the inconsistencies is as a result of what is written in the standards. Standards and the requirements within them have to be reproducible. You can't test one product and get one result, and an identical product and get a different type of a result. So that is very, very important. A backflow prevention standard comes to mind that was produced a couple of 3 decades ago, that at the beginning the requirements were not reproducible, and I think it was fixed at a later time. And principle 5 is good practice in conformity assessment, which has to do with international comparability and avoiding barriers. And what this talks about is if a standard is written in North America, it would be good to have it in mind that it should be similar to a standard that is written in Europe, so that there's not that much gap, and manufacturers don't have to go and conduct a whole bunch of testing just to go from one geography to another and to avoid barriers. This principle is obviously very important. The next part of 17007, again, goes into how the standards should be written, should be clear, direct, and precise. The sampling is very important. Some of the sampling methods that I'm familiar with, ASTM standards for pipes in particular, I recall, they say that you should select 10 samples and 9 out of 10 have to pass. And if one fails, then you select another 10 and all 10 have to pass. So those are some of the requirements with regards to sampling. Some standards use student's T method, which is a good statistical method. But then going to the third bullet, the sequence of testing. So there are sometimes the standards have destructive testing within them. And if you select 2 samples and one needs to go through one sequence of testing and the other through another sequence of testing, you've got to make sure that the destructive testing is towards the end or at the end of the sequence, not in the middle, because all of a sudden you're destroying a product and you can't continue the product certification or product testing. The process for product certification, based upon what I've seen and some of the companies that I've worked for, is very, very similar. The schemes are a bit different here and there, but the process is very similar. There's an initial contact, there's an estimate of capabilities and cost, and the estimation of capabilities is very important. Certification bodies need to candidly tell the clients if they have the capability of conducting product certification in a certain category, and they have to show the scope of certification, the scope of accreditation to the clients. The manufacturer submits application and supporting information and conducts testing. Parallel to that activity, an inspection of the manufacturing plant is conducted by certification bodies, and that is to ascertain that there is a quality system available. After successful evaluation, a certificate is issued. And by the way, there's a do loop for those of you who are familiar with the old Fortran language, there's an iterative process in product evaluation and certification. There are many times that certification bodies require additional information or a product has not met the requirement. So it doesn't directly go from inspection to successful evaluation, but at the end, that's the end result. And a certificate is issued, but then continuous compliance inspections are conducted to verify that the products have continued to comply with the requirements of a set document. You know, there are a lot of marks of conformity. The ones that we had access to, we our own. There's several marks that you see here. The ones that have the PMG have to do with the PMG or plumbing, mechanical, and gas products. You see a C at the 8 o'clock position, which is a Canadian identifier for products that have Canadian listing. You see a MX, and that's the Mexican identifier for products that have Mexican listings to some specific Mexican norms, which is norms of Mexico. So those are some of the conformity assessment marks the conformity that we have available here. Now, the benefits of product certification is varied depending upon who you are. The designers, they will love to see a product certified because then they can specify it for a job. Incidentally, at ICC, what we do is when a product is certified, we link the report to the electronic codes that we have, and they're online. They're free for anybody, designers or specifiers, to use. So they can find out if a product is certified. Manufacturers' benefits is very obvious. They don't have to go to every jurisdiction and get a product reviewed. They can go to a certifying body, get it reviewed, get a certificate, and go to the code official and get the product approved for installation. Code officials obviously benefit because they don't have time to review a variety of products that comes to them, and they normally rely on certification bodies for that purpose. Now, I want to get into some of the topics that may be of interest to you. The history of reduction of lead in drinking water, I wanted to talk about that a bit. I know there were a lot of activities in the 2000s with regards to lead reduction. California was the first state, at least that's my recollection, that came up with a bill, an assembly bill. It was called 1953 during that year, and it was signed into law in 2006. This particular legislation required lead reduction in products to a weighted average of no more than 0.25% in pipes, fixtures, and fittings for drinking water. The one thing I have to say is, and I do recollect at that time we were certifying these products, the bill and the law did not have enough information. It did have a method to calculate, but did not have enough information with regards to how the product needs to be tested and so on. So the certification commenced, and this became a part of California's Health and Safety Code 1168-75. But as a result of not enough information in this particular law, I believe at that time, NSF International came up with an Annex G to further clarify how the product needs to be tested, and eventually NSF 372 was written, which is very specific as to how the product needs to be tested and evaluated. And that basically gave a consistency to the evaluation of products for lead content. Now, NSF 372 uses a formula to calculate the weighted average of lead content. Now, I have not put the formula here, but I put it in a narration which says this uses the wetted surface area of one component in comparison with all the components. So that means you divide it by all the components, wetted surface area. And then you multiply it by the lead content, and then you sum it all up, and the summation should be less than 0.25%. And NSF 61, as I mentioned, it has testing and analysis. And again, in my view, and that's only my view, I think NSF 372 did the industry quite a bit of service by making the evaluation consistent. After the AB 1953 was put together, a few other states decided to adopt a version of that, or maybe the same one. Vermont comes to mind. And so the activities didn't really stop at that point, and it went to the federal level, and the Senate Bill S-3874 was presented and in 2011, and it was signed by the former President Obama. This particular bill redefined the lead to mean not containing more than 0.2% lead when used with respect to solders and fluxes, and not more than a weighted average of 0.25% lead when used with respect to wetted surfaces of pipe, plumbing fixtures, and fittings. The formula used is basically the same as what we have discussed, and the Act became effective 36 months after its enactment. It was in 2014. So many manufacturers decided that they wished to go ahead and certify at that time. And as a result, I know not just us, but many other certification bodies already have a number of certifications to NSF 372. But that being said, there was a recent change in the Reduction of Lead in Drinking Water Act, and I'm just going to read it. The rule does require now for such products to be certified by an accredited third-party certification body beginning 3 years after the final rule was published. I think final rule was published in July of this year, so 3 years thereafter. It does have some exceptions for manufacturers or importers that have fewer than 10 employees, or manufacturers or importers that are self-certifying any custom fabricated products regardless of the number of employees. And with the custom fabricated products, I believe the reason why that was put in is those are tougher to certify because of the fact that it's tough to prove continuous compliance because they're custom fabricated. Exclusion from the certification requirements are products, components of assembly of pipes and fittings and fixtures that need not be individually certified if the entire product is in its final assembly is lead-free certified. So if one component, all the components are certified, the specific components don't need to be certified. And the other one is the direct replacement parts for previously installed lead-free certified products. They don't need to be certified. And last but not least is the dishwashers. The bill AB 2060 that many of you are probably very familiar with it went beyond this 0.25% weighted average lead content. It basically went to the leachate, lead leachate, and additionally defined lead-free for the purpose of conveying and dispensing water for human consumption to mean that leachate of no more than 1 microgram of lead per liter or 1 part per billion under certain tests and meeting specified certifications. Basically, that brought the requirements of NSF 61 from 5 to 1 Q value. And Q value, I think, is what most of the people in the audience are probably familiar with. This bill, as you know, went through the Assembly and State Senates, but then it was kind of stuck in the Appropriation Committee. And my understanding was that there were some thoughts that it's going to cost somewhere between $800,000 to $1.6 million. And at this point, California is, for a variety of reasons, and not to mention COVID-19, has some financial issues, and maybe that's the reason why they held it at that level. But that does not mean that NSF 61 has not been revised. In fact, I looked at the latest version, which was published, I believe, in August, and these requirements are in it. Product certification to NSF 61, Annex 7, and 372 is basically the same process as other product certification by different certification bodies. The schemes are used in the same manner. As I mentioned, many products already comply and are certified to NSF 372, but for those who are not, I'm sure all the certification bodies are open to accept applications. And with that, I want to thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if I can. And if not, I would be happy to send the questions to one of our specialists to answer and send it to ASA. Thank you very much.
Thanks for an awesome presentation. Certainly informative. A couple of questions have come in throughout the course of the webinar here. The first one, what types of plumbing products does ICC-ES certify specifically?
ICC-ES is accredited to certify all products that are covered in the International Plumbing Code, Uniform Plumbing Code, or National Plumbing Code of Canada. We certify pipes, backflow prevention devices, faucets, toilets, bathtubs, all sorts of things. So anything that you can find in the IPC or UPC or NPC, we can certify to.
And another quick question here, does ICC-ES offer any free certifications?
Well, I mean, in a context of this matter, I don't know if I can talk about free certifications, but we we have a fee schedule, and there are certain things that, like water sense and so forth, if there is a certification to the standard, the performance standard, the water sense certification will not have any additional charge. But I prefer not to get into the fees if at all possible.
Certainly. And I have a quick question before we get out of here today. And again, thanks for taking the time to put on this webinar. What would your advice be, or your message be to a distributor, an ASA member distributor that's on this webinar today, in terms of what they should be taking away from this in their talks with customers and suppliers?
What I would say is that become familiar with all certifying bodies. There are a number of them, from ourselves to UL and Intertech and CSA. There are a whole bunch of them. Become familiar with them. Become familiar with their marks of conformity. But I would go as far as saying that demand proof of compliance through a certification by one of these entities, and make sure that these entities are accredited with a proper scope of accreditation to show that they are actually competent to conduct product certification.
Excellent advice. Well, Shahin Moynihan, again, thanks a ton for taking time today to present this webinar, which will, if anyone viewing the webinar today needs to access it again, it'll be available in the My ASA section on the ASA website. And again, Network 2020 Virtual is October 7th and 8th. Go to asa.net for the full details. We will have 10 educational sessions, 5 live, 5 on demand, lots of great content. So we hope to see you there. And again, thanks for attending this ASA members only webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.